Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a ton of cards using Simon Says Stamps October 2019 card kit. This is the Thankful Flowers card kit. This started out as 2 cards. I grabbed the Thankful Flowers stamp set that comes in the kit. Everything I'm using is also available individually, and I will link to everything as always in the description box below as well as on my blog. So my plan was to use this large floral cluster stamp. Big surprise. Amy likes the large floral images. I have it in my MISTI here, and I'm just stamping it onto some dark chocolate cardstock with clear embossing ink. And then I'm heat embossing it with one of my current favorites, the Ink on 3 Strawberry Champagne Embossing Powder. This is basically like a rose, like a nice light rose gold embossing powder. So this on the dark brown cardstock is so pretty. So pretty. So like I said, I originally intended to only make 2 cards. So I did this one and then heat embossed it. And then I did a second panel on the Desert Storm cardstock that comes in the kit. I'm going to do the exact same process. I'm going to put my cardstock in, anti-static powder tool, brush away the excess anti-static powder, ink up the stamp with Simon's clear embossing ink, and then this time I'm going to heat emboss this with Simon's Detail Gold embossing powder, which is another favorite. That's why I have these like larger containers that each have, people ask me this, there's like 3-ish containers, like embossing powder containers poured into these plastic containers I use. Not necessary. Like for years, all I've been using is just the container of embossing powder and a coffee filter, which I still do. But with these colors that I use a lot, I thought after almost 15 years of stamping, it was time to kind of upgrade to the larger containers. Plus, after all these years, I had so many containers, containers of gold. I had the strawberry champagne, white, clear, etc. Anyway, so I'd started with those 2 and then I couldn't stop. So all these little panels are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I just cut them down from cardstock in the kit, plus cardstock in my stash, sticking to all the same colors. So it's the dark chocolate, the Desert Storm, and then also Simon's cream cardstock. And I just keep that image in my MISTI. In fact, that one stays for all these cards. And I just kept kind of experimenting. So on the dark chocolate cardstock, I did one with that strawberry champagne, and then I stamped another one and heat embossed it with that gold embossing powder, because the gold on the dark brown also looks just gorgeous. Love. And then with the ivory cardstock, I ended up doing, I stamped the flowers with just dark chocolate ink. Really like how that looked. And then I also couldn't resist embossing. So if I was to go back, this portion of it, I would do this all more in order. I would have heat embossed everything first, stamped everything, coated everything with embossing powder, heated it all at one time, and then did the last couple with just that dark chocolate ink. But I was going back and forth because I was like, ooh, what would it look like with this? What would it look like with this? And then I just created a monster. So I kept kind of going back and forth, but in the end, like see here, there was like parts of the stamp because I'd cleaned off the dark brown ink, and then I was stamping it with the clear ink, but there was still some, stamp cleaner, but in the end it was fine. But anyway, with the cream cardstock, I did one with the dark chocolate ink, one heat embossed with gold, one heat embossed with that rose gold color, and then I did the same thing with this KRAFT or Desert Storm cardstock. One was in gold, one was in the strawberry champagne, and then one I just stamped with the dark brown ink. So it just gave me a whole bunch of options. And again, in the end, I made 8 cards, but I still have pattern paper left, I still have thickers left, I still have some of the foil cardstock left. Like, I easily could have done a dozen, possibly more. So this was just fun. And all of these I stamped the exact same way. All of these panels were the exact same size. So it was just kind of almost like a mass production thing, just a little bit disjointed with me kind of jumping around and experimenting. There's that strawberry champagne on the cream, just gorgeous. So now I've got all of these backgrounds here, like just card front panels. 3 of the Desert Storm, 3 of the cream, and then 2 of the brown. So now it's a matter of turning these into cards. So I start off a little slow, like just kind of figuring things out. And This first one, I'm just using one of the dark brown pieces. This is the one that I had heat embossed with the gold embossing powder. And I just trimmed it down with my paper trimmer. And then I have all my card bases are just going to be cream cardstock. That was the easiest way to do, multiples like this. I kept all the card bases the exact same rather than, switch things up with different colors. some be brown, some be Desert Storm, etc. So kept all the card bases the same. And then the pattern papers from the kit. This is the My Mind's Eye, My Heritage paper. And same thing. I'm trimming it down, saving all my scraps, just pushing them off to the side. I had paper everywhere by the time these were done. But yeah, saving all my little scraps and random pieces. And then it's just a matter of like trimming things down and adding little strips and whatnot to make each of these cards. Because all of them I made just slightly different. So with this first one, I've got everything kind of trimmed down. And then I'm going to use some of these thickers that come in the kit. These are the American Crafts. There's a name on them. They are the Anne foil foam letter stickers. So they're all, gold foil and they're on foams. They're all popped up with dimension. And I haven't used thickers in years. Like I think it's been close to a decade since I've used them. I like them. I'm already like, ooh, I'm keeping this pack that, I have with all these other letters, but it's like, these will be nice to just, it's so nice to spell out, simple sentiments. You could personalize if I'd wanted to, add a person's name or just like words like hello, smile, etc. Anywho. So, like I said, I kept that floral image in my MISTI in the exact same spot. It does not move. It stays there. And on the inside of all the cards, I stamp it again. But this time I'm using Simon's Cobblestone ink, which is kind of like a warm gray sort of a color. I'm kind of obsessed with this ink lately. I used it in a previous video the other day. And I just find myself like, I think maybe it's just like the fall colors, everything. And it's perfect with this kit. But there's just something about it. I keep reaching for it. And it's like my new favorite. Like the Cobblestone ink, the dark chocolate color from Simon, some rose gold or gold, a KRAFT color like the Desert Storm is like, and then like a cream colored. This whole thing is like my current favorite color combo because it's elegant and fall and yet can work at any time. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So I stamped that floral cluster and I'm using my mini MISTI then for the sentiments because I don't want to move that big floral. Again, if I had been more like everything planned out ahead of time, I could have stamped all the insides. Like you don't need multiple stamp platforms. I could have stamped all the insides with large floral, finished them, and then removed that and then used the MISTI, for all my sentiments. But because I was, as always, flying by the seat of my pants and just kind of figuring it out as I went along, I used both platforms and I could have used a third really because I had everything just piled up. This kit was fun. One of my favorites. Every month it's a favorite, but this one there's something about this kit that really just struck with me, hence me making 8 cards with it. So I just went along and would sometimes stamp, sometimes heat emboss on the inside of the cards. With this one, I heat embossed another sentiment, added a strip of pattern paper, and then I'm going to start adhering everything to the card front. So I'll use a combination of, I was using my little Xyron tape runner to adhere the pattern paper. And then like this panel, I'm popping up with Simon's Big Mama foam tape to give it just a little bit of dimension. And then, adding a little strip of cardstock. And as this goes along, the process of these cards becomes easier and easier because I end up with more and more little scraps. Because as you're trimming down the cardstock and the pattern paper and whatnot, I all those little pieces I just kind of kept off to the side. And then I would grab them as I'm making each card. And it's like, ooh, this little random strip. It was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to use this on the inside. So I would just add a little bit of adhesive, pop that on the inside, and it just kind of ties everything together. So the more you do, the more, you end up with all these little scraps. And it's like, I can keep going, making more and more and more cards. So yeah, I made 8, but if I'd had the time, I easily could have made a dozen or more. So after I had all of these adhered, this is where I start adhering these thickers and decided to spell out the words thank you, since the whole card, like the kit and the main stamp set are like a thank you base, which is perfect because I say this all the time. I never have enough thank you cards. I always like making more. That's also what I love, like mass producing the most of is, making a ton of thank you cards to have in my stash. So adhered all of these thickers to spell out the word thank you. And then card number 1 is done. And then I start going on to the next cards. So in the kit, there's also the Bold Thanks wafer die. This is also going to be another favorite of mine. I love how it's like on such a straight line along the bottom and it's all connected. Really like that. I don't know. I really like this, and I like the font too. And of course it goes perfectly with the sentiments in the set. But I die cut that multiple times from some of the cream cardstock. And then I also die cut some of the Tim Holtz foil cardstock that's in the kit as well. There you get 2 sheets of the like rose gold color, and then you actually get 2 sheets of the copper color. I didn't use the copper on any of these. Just the rose gold, and only like pieces of the one sheet. I still have a full other one for other things. So I die cut the sentiments from that and then stack them, just to give them that little extra bit of dimension. So I did several at a time because I knew I was going to use up all of them since I'm doing so many cards. And then for this card, I'm using the cream cardstock that I had heat embossed the floral cluster with that strawberry champagne embossing powder. And then just kind of, I had already taken all those pattern papers and turned up to the sides of that I preferred, because all of them are double-sided. But I had already kind of chosen like which ones were all my favorites, and then would just kind of dig through there and figure out like what I'm going to use. And then again, cutting down strips, card fronts, etc. with all of them. So it was just a matter of kind of fiddling what can go where, how can I make this one a little different from the one I made before, just to give it, you know, some little extra something, and also a way to use more of the pattern paper so not everything is the exact same, because you only get 1 sheet of each specific pattern. So, and also to me, this is more fun than doing the exact same, like mass producing the exact same thing over and over and over again. Like this just kind of mixes it up enough. And then also, while I'm thinking about it, this also makes like for a perfect, like, you know, a card set you could make a whole bunch of to give as a gift. Because, you know, if bundled all together with the envelopes, it's like, it would just look so nice, you know, because every single card is slightly different, but they all kind of, you know, they coordinate, etc. So, anywho, random thoughts as I'm doing my voiceover. So, put my card base into my MISTI, stamp that floral image with the cobblestone ink. And then I'm drying it with my heat tool because I want to make sure this ink is completely dry because I don't want it to pick up any of the embossing powder. Although where I ended up stamping the sentiment lower anyway, I was originally going to stamp sentiment kind of over the floral cluster, so I didn't want it messing up the sentiment. But I tested it out, used my anti-static powder tool, poured the embossing powder over the flowers just to make sure nothing was clinging. And then I'm going to stamp one of the large sentiments from that Thankful Flower stamp set onto the inside of this card with some clear embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss it with that strawberry champagne embossing powder. So again, using my mini MISTI, I'm just like back and forth with all of this stuff. So after I got everything lined up, stamp this with the clear embossing ink, and then I'll heat emboss this with that strawberry champagne so that it coordinates with what I'm going to add to the card front. So I would go back and forth with these, like some were using strawberry champagne, some were using detail gold, some I would stamp in brown. Again, it just depended on what card front I was using, and yeah, just having fun with it. So melded this with my heat tool, and then I'd also, like off camera, sometimes I would stamp and heat emboss some of the smaller sentiments from the set onto random strips of cardstock just to kind of add to each of these cards. And then once I was happy with everything, I would just start adhering it all to the card front. So all the pattern paper and whatnot, I would adhere with my little Xyron tape runner. Some panels I would add the foam tape to, depending on what I was doing. And then any of the little tiny strips, I just use Simon's KRAFT tacky glue because it's easier to deal with on something that's really thin than using a tape runner. And then as I would go along, I would start sort of figuring out like, a little strip of paper would look great here, or a little bit of pattern paper, or a little bit of that like foil paper, which is what I ended up deciding here after adhering some of the little random strips. Like I added, this little tiny strip that had been cut off of one of the card fronts of that Desert Storm cardstock. And I was like, ooh, that would make a perfect little border. So not always rhyme or reason. I get asked a lot that too, like when you're coming up with layouts and that, a lot of times it's just dictated by what is sitting on my desk at the moment, especially when I'm working with pattern paper, which a lot of people I think will be quite happy with this video because I get asked about this a lot because that's what I used to do all the time. You know, that was my thing for years, was just pattern paper, pattern paper, pattern paper. Still love pattern paper. I usually get inspiration from it more than actually using it. But then things like this remind me of why I love pattern paper so much. And this pack that comes in this kit is just really gorgeous. I really love these patterns. I've always had a soft spot for my Mind's Eye papers. They do some of the best. Like just the size of the patterns and the scale and the mix and the colors, etc., are just some of my all-time favorites. And this pack is no exception. I really love it. So after that card was done, this one I went a little different, and rather than adding any sort of die cut sentiment, I just stamped the sentiment right onto the panel with clear embossing ink, and I'm going to emboss it with that gold embossing powder. And then after I get this heat embossed, I'm going to die cut this with one of Simon's stitched rectangle wafer dies. I decided to pull that in as a way to kind of mix things up a bit instead of just trimming down all the panels with my paper trimmer, because then it gives it that little extra something. So line up that stitched rectangle wafer die, and then I'll run that through my die cut machine, so it just gives it that little extra something. And then on the inside of the card, stamp that flower with the cobblestone ink, and then I have a strip of the pattern paper that I'm using on the front. So I had a leftover strip, so I'm going to add that to the inside, and that also gave me a way to stamp just one of the littler sentiments from the set. And I stamped that with some dark chocolate ink, and then I could adhere this little strip of pattern paper just to kind of tie it all together. Once that's adhered in place, trim off the excess, and then I'm going to adhere the larger panel of pattern paper to the card front. And I also framed this die cut rectangle with just a piece of dark chocolate cardstock, just to give it that little extra something. And then adhere the paper to my card base with the Xyron tape runner. And then I'll pop up that heat embossed panel with more of the Big Mama foam tape. Again, just gives it that little extra bit of dimension, you know, because that's the other thing. I didn't use any embellishments on any of these cards. I thought about it a lot while making these, because I was like, ooh, I have my Studio Katia rose gold confetti. I have gold confetti, you know, gold jewels, etc. That would look amazing on all these cards. Decided not to. I could still go back and add it if I want. It would look great. But I decided to kind of stick more to what is just in the kit. And, you know, somewhat of a proof that you don't need, this is hard for me to say, you don't need all the embellishments, but we want them because they're beautiful and they're fun. But a person doesn't have to have everything. I know. I'm probably going to add like 500 embellishments to the next card just to make up for that. Anywho, so by this point, my desk is like an absolute disaster. I have tried to be more, you know, professional and keep my like filming space kind of clear so it's not so cluttered for you guys that are watching. It is not happening. Like I don't care, like as big as my desk is and like I make space and I clean and organize, I have like a 20-foot swath of just cardstock and scraps and embellishments and scissors and heat embossing powder and stamp plot, you know. This is real life. This is what I do. Anyway, and I was having fun doing it. So, again, finishing off the insides of my cards. This one was stamped, every single one. All my insides were stamped with that cobblestone ink. I really love that color on the cream. And then with this one, I heat embossed the sentiment with the strawberry champagne. Added another random little scrap of pattern paper. And then added my card front again to the card base. Sometimes I would completely cover the card base. Other times I would cut the panels down to be slightly smaller so the card base frames it. Again, just kind of flying around, figuring out what I want to do on this particular card. By this point, I think I'm filming at night. I'm pretty sure I'm filming at night by this point. So like this panel especially, this is the strawberry champagne on the Desert Storm cardstock. It's really hard to see. But this is more just my lighting. Now that the light has changed, it's fall here. It gets dark a lot earlier than it did, so I have to use my little cheapo studio lights. They're not even studio lights. They're lights from IKEA that have light bulbs in them. But anyway, my lighting's horrible. and it really washed out this rose gold embossing powder. Like, it doesn't really look like much on camera, but in real life it's really pretty. So anyway, adhered all the things, doing my thing, random strips and scraps and whatnot of cardstock. This time I die cut that bold thanks sentiment. I die cut it from that dark chocolate cardstock and then stacked that 3 times. I thought that would play really nicely with the rose gold embossing powder and all of these like patterns and everything, rather than do the one with the rose gold like foil cardstock. So did that. And then the inside card, this time I did use my larger MISTI. I was just really careful adhering the sentiment because I was still refusing to remove that stamp because it was just in the perfect spot. So I inked up just the sentiment with that dark chocolate ink and then stamped that onto the inside of the card. Purposely stamped it more off the side than normal because I wanted to add a strip of that green leafy pattern paper that I used on the front of the card. Again, just to tie it all together because these are 6x6 pieces, and once you start cutting them down for A2 size cards, there's always pieces left over. And that's what I love to do, is add, strips to the inside of the card at the very least to kind of tie everything together. So adhered that to the inside of the card, trimmed off the excess as always. And then I can adhere my card front to the card base. And this one is one of the ones where it covers the entire card base. So just coat the back with my tape runner and then pop that into place. And another card is complete. So as I finished each card, I would set it off and then just grab another card front panel that I had either stamped or heat embossed, whatever. And then either die cut it with one of the stitch rectangle dies, or I would trim it down with my paper trimmer. So this one I trimmed down with my paper trimmer and then adhered it to this pattern paper. I love this pattern paper. I love this whole pack. Here's another random thought. I was like, oh, this would be such nice. Could you imagine having a bathroom tiled with like dark slate hexagon tile? Like, would that not be amazing? And then that green houndstooth. Could you imagine like green houndstooth wallpaper in that bathroom? And then dark chocolate brown vanity. And then, brass fixtures. These are the things that go through my head when I'm doing stuff like this. Plus, I'm also kind of obsessed right now with bathroom design. In my head, I've been designing my dream bathroom for the someday file. And yeah, I've been like literally obsessing over tile and walls and fixtures and faucets, So that's what's going through my head. These patterns were really inspirational for bathroom design. So yeah, that's what was going on. Anywho, after I finished assembling this card front, stamped the inside of the card with the cobblestone ink. I sound like a broken record, but that's what I was doing. Stamped the inside of the card. And then you can see I was like, the way I'm like gerrymandering everything to work, in my little MISTI. This is like one of these cases too where I was like, oh, this is why I need more than one MISTI. But anyway, lined up my sentiment, and then this one I stamped with the dark chocolate ink. So stamp that with the dark chocolate ink. And then I'm going to add another little strip of pattern paper. This is just one of those times too where it's like, oh, this is just working out perfectly. This random little scrap. Kind of trimmed off the little edge with my scissors. And then how it just fits perfectly. So add some adhesive to that and then pop it onto the inside of the card. And then once that's lined up, I can start adhering everything again to the card front. So I've got everything assembled for the card front. So all I have to do is add the adhesive to the back of it. And then I can pop this onto the card base again with the tape runner. So once I've got this adhered, this one is now complete as well. And this one I'd added another, scrap of brown cardstock that I had heat embossed another sentiment on. And then with this one, I had die cut it, matted it with the Desert Storm cardstock. And then I'm going to spell out the word thanks with these thickers. Since this one was the gold embossed on cream, the thanks stickers just fit really nicely. And just dumb luck that they happen to fit on this panel perfectly. So line them up, just kind of working backwards basically until I had the word spelled out. And then trim down my pattern paper. And then on the inside of the card, after I had stamped the floral cluster with the cobblestone ink. I'm going to stamp another sentiment, this big one that I love this sentiment. It's just perfect. So I stamped that and heat embossed it with the gold embossing powder. And then I can adhere my pattern paper to the card base. And I think I cut the pattern paper just slightly smaller than the card front. All of these cards, by the way, are A2 size cards. 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So, and all of them are top folding. This is just something, it's just habit. I rarely do side fold cards anymore. I've been doing it for so long that I actually have to manually think about doing a side fold card, and I still only do them, 1 out of 100 or something like that. Anywho, got everything adhered, and then this card was also complete. And again, I kept looking at them and I was like, ooh, I could add some crystals, add some embellishments. It would finish them all off. It would look great. But still looks great with the patterns and the heat embossing and everything. They just work. So this card, I heat embossed the sentiment with the strawberry champagne embossing powder, added the little random scrap of pattern paper just to tie it all together. And then the card front, I had adhered 2 of the pattern, one full size piece of the pattern paper. And then I had this larger scrap of this kind of gold color hexagon tile. This is another one that I'm just like, oh, see, I even call it tile. To me, it's tile. Subway tiles and hexagon tiles. Those are my things. Love them. Love them. Anyway, got it adhered. That finished off my cards. So hopefully my video made sense. I'm now thinking about bathroom fixtures again. Anywho, 8 cards with this card kit, with the addition of the embossing powders and a little bit of extra cardstock. As always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I use, to the card kit, to everything individually, etc. So you can check that out below if you are interested. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping, for commenting, for sharing. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.